thankful for that. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. This is actually going to be a really interesting session because we're going to present various updates that we had on the presentation, on the report, on the research, and this is the first time that we're going to share with you. And I apologize, having some throat issues, so I'm going to be drinking a lot of water and trying to keep my my voice fluid. So let me start sharing my screen. Hold on 1 second because I'm want to make sure that I'm looking at it correctly. Can you please just let me know if you're able to see the presentation?
Yes, Octavio.
Perfect. Thank you, Cesar.
I can see it.
Perfect. Thank you. So let's start. So again, this is our December meeting. This is we still have a couple more meetings left, but this one is very important because, as I mentioned, we are right now presenting some of the updates from the research process the research project that we haven't shared with you before. So we're very happy and very glad that you're all here to discuss this update. So I'm going to keep moving. This is the agenda that we're going to be following today. We're going to present those updates and some remaining items in the timeline. We're going to be talking briefly about the January community forums and an upcoming joint meeting between the working group and the advisory group. If you can and if you want, we would like to hear some updates on the addendum that some members of the advisory group are working on. If you're ready to share with us, that'll be fantastic. And then finally, as we always do, we're gonna try to leave some good space for open discussion between advisory group members and maybe some questions from members of the audience. So.
Hey, Octavio, before
Sure.
you move forward, I just wanted to let you know you're showing the presenter view and there is a pop-up that's also blocking the slide. So I think it might be easiest if you put it into slideshow view.
Thank you for letting me know. Let me try to fix that. This is here, and it should be hypercenter view. Resume slideshow. What about now? Still?
Now it's not showing either mode. It's just showing the main PowerPoint.
What about now?
Screen.
It should be working now. The full screen.
Yeah.
Perfect.
You're good.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much, Sydney. So today we're going to be presenting updates on three specific things. One, on what is referred to question number 2, the research question that looks into the justice system contact for individuals that were not booked during the pandemic. We're going to present some results from the needs, services, gaps, and barriers study. We have some updates as well on the cost analysis. And finally, just a quick review of the best practices portion that we discussed last meeting. But we're going to start with the research question about how does the justice system contact look like for individuals who were not booked during the pandemic. For this specific question, we use sampling data from ARGIS and from the Hub. I apologize. what we're trying to look at is how policy changes to reduce jail population for low-level offenders affected, contacts with law enforcement after or during the pandemic period. For this specific portion of the study, we consider individuals that had any type of law enforcement contacts during the pandemic. For the time period, we narrowed it to the first year of the pandemic, meaning April 1 through 2020 through March 31st, 2021. We focused on individuals with only 6 drug charges or in 3 public order offenses, and others were excluded from the sample. And we picked individuals based on contacts with law enforcement rather than booked by law enforcement. So this is all contacts with law enforcement, which gave us an original sample of around 11,904 individuals that met this criteria. It's important to mention, however, that we had a slight issue with the code during the analysis, which led to this to have around 315 felonies included in this sample. We're fixing that issue, and so in the final report, the sample is going to be smaller, but since it's a little less than 1%, we don't expect that the changes are going to be that relevant regarding the results that we're going to discuss today. And so in the end, what we wanted to know is the pattern of law enforcement contact for the 12 months prior and the 12 months after the initial during COVID law enforcement interaction or contact. And what we were trying to see if, for example, what was the history of similar offenses previous to COVID, and how does it look like after COVID, and see if we can have some takeaways on that. So some of the initial takeaways from this analysis is that we found that the large majority of individuals with law enforcement contacts were for drug possession offenses. So most of them come from any of those 6 drug possession charges. We also found that a pattern that this type of conducts were repeated multiple times by same individuals without changing a lot. So meaning that the majority of individuals in our sample had the same type of conducts across time during the time period that we looked at. We also found initially that there were more law enforcement contacts prior to the pandemic than during the pandemic period. Of course, there are many reasons why this can be, but this is important, at least for now, to find those patterns. And of course, these patterns decrease during the pandemic. So, it is important to see that at least with this policy changes, we didn't see an increase in law enforcement contacts for this type of offenders that might have benefited from these policy changes during the pandemic period. And some takeaways from the numbers, the contacts per person declined from a pre-pandemic median of 3 contacts per person to a post-pandemic period of 2 per individual. The mean for the pre-pandemic was 4.8, and the mean for post-pandemic was 3.4. And the reason why we show both median and the mean, it is because sometimes there are individuals with larger numbers of contacts, while the large majority have very small number of contacts. So this can skew the data, and that's why it's important to show both the median, which means that the most often number of contacts with law enforcement, as well as the mean. And what we've found, interestingly enough, that the average time between offenses by the same individual increased from the pandemic period, meaning that there was more time in between offenses during the pandemic period compared to pre-pandemic. So these are some of the things, some of the remaining questions that we still have. Again, we are still working on this sample. We have been trying to clean the sample, find issues, and start responding to some questions about this initial inquiry of what does the contact with justice system look like for these individuals who were not booked during the pandemic. The next segment of the report that we're including in this interim report on December is a portion of needs assessment. So needs services, gaps, and barriers to services. Just a quick update on how the methodology that we followed. How do we obtain the data that we're analyzing? We had several sources. We requested information from many institutions. We used previous SANDAG evaluations and studies. And we also used some of the needs that were recorded during or in our series of ATI surveys or in the community forums that were held over the summer. Most of the information, it's worth mentioning, or a lot of the information that we received come from 211. And some of the summaries that we can draw from this analysis of the data. First of all, just to mention that we looked into 3 different populations: general population, a population with history of incarceration, and a population with history of housing stability. And across the board, the most common need that we found was housing. Housing was present, was number 1 across the 3 populations that we looked at. But also, especially for populations with history of incarceration and history of housing instability, we found that the common need that was mentioned was mental health services and substance abuse treatment. And then we looked at the services, the services provided. So again, we looked at different sources, institutions, previous ATI analysis, the community survey, and others. And what we found was that, or what we were trying to measure is information from these services or institutions on referrals for service or services, and for justice involved individuals, the types of services that they received during the time in jail. And some of the takeaways that we have from this portion of the research is that there is a clear need for credible messengers and peer support for people who have those needs and are looking for effective services. But those services have to be easy to access and not to be perceived as punishment. It's really important. And bearing in mind that not all needs will be the same, and therefore not all the services should be the same. But at least making sure that the most basic needs are met for each individual. Sorry. And so here are, some of these takeaways of this report. The importance of ensuring people, can meet their basic needs. Having the peer support, and training for people, so we can leave a livable wage. Sorry about that. The final portion of this presentation on updates on the research project is the cost analysis, or what are the costs of alternatives to incarceration. And this is a really important segment of the research, one that took a long time. So we have to consider a lot of things before we look into the numbers. First, we have to bear in mind that this is not a cost effectiveness analysis. We're not looking at long-term functioning. We're not comparing programs to one another. We are not considering for recidivism. So the point of this is just calculating the cost of incarceration and calculate the cost of other services that could be alternatives to incarceration. For this purposes, we first set up or define a baseline of costs of incarceration, or costs of jail. I apologize again. So important to say, we only look at county code costs. So we don't look at costs by the state. We initially had consider looking into other services, but there was not a lot of information, or the information was not easy to obtain. So for this, because of this, we're not able to include costs by district attorneys or public defenders. And again, we are only trying to calculate some of the costs, and because this is only the county or costs by the county, we most likely are in the very low side of these estimates. As I said, we originally considered 9 alternatives, and we ended up just comparing or analyzing 5, based mainly on the availability of the data. For this, we also have to build a sample to calculate the costs of these services and or jail based on a realistic group of individuals. So we again, we picked individuals with in this case with bookings, and similar to the other segment of the research, we did look at 6 drug charges and 3 public order offenses, and anything else was excluded. For this portion of the analysis, we included bookings only from January 1st, 2018 through February 9th, 2020. So this is all pre-pandemic. So we want to see how the costs look like before the pandemic, right? And let's say in a regular setting. We sample by bookings. So each individual included in our sample can appear there more than once, meaning that they can have more than one booking. And in this case, it's true because as we will see, there are people that come to the system much more often than others, and so we were trying to calculate or capture this fact. And then what we did is we grouped bookings by individual, so we can see the average, the number of bookings and the length of stay, and calculate the averages to start calculating general numbers. And so, yeah, just one more thing, because some of the information that we received, or the estimates we received, were based on 2021 or 2020 estimates or cost. What we did for the analysis in specific is deflated those costs to $2019 to capture the reality more accurately. And because this is a period of 2 years and 2 months, and it was much easier, or might be more easier to determine or trying to calculate the costs by year, we created a synthetic population to allow us to at least calculate how those costs look like year by year. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the following slides. So again, our sample was 1960, 158 individuals with combined had 35,206 bookings. The median was 1, meaning 1 booking per individual, but it was a range of 1 to 40. So, with 1 individual having 40 bookings in this period, it was important for us to keep the median because it would the range would skew our calculations a lot. And the same with the length of stay. The median length of stay calculated by days was 1, but in a range of 0 to 243 days. Interesting things that we found is that 68% of our sample were booked only 1 time, and 32% were booked more than once. So those individuals who keep coming back to the system, to the criminal justice system, account only for 32% of our sample, compared to 68 of those who only came once. And the total days in jail spent by this population, by this sample, was calculated in 100,000 more or less days. We for actual costs of days in jail, we of course excluded anything that was 0. So we calculated those instances where we had at least 1 day of bookings of jail. And so here are some of the results that we found. As we can see, if we calculate just as an average cost per day, and based on our total sample, calculating by the average, the median days, we have a total of 4.84 million for 1 day in jail for the entire population. However, because of what I mentioned, that some individuals come only 1 time and some individuals come more than 1, it was important to see the difference. So the first, the second line that we see in this chart account for those who only came to the justice system once and never came back. And so for those, the estimated cost of jail was of 31 million, calculated in $20,019. However, the ones that came back multiple times, and we had an average of 12 days, and within the sample we had 3 bookings in 4 days, between this population. So we can see that the cost per individual increases quite significantly. And so the most accurate calculation that we can come up with is what we call the segmented jail total, that accounts separately for both groups of individuals. And then we calculated the costs of the alternatives that we can see here. A couple of things that come to or very obvious from looking at this is that costs for some services are higher than than others, but especially VHC and residential treatment appear to be much more expensive. But it's important to point out that this is the case because of the number of days where services are provided in these alternatives. And specifically for behavioral court, it is also worth mentioning that other collaborative courts can also be equally expensive. So, we're only looking into behavioral court, but it's important to know that other types of alternatives may look similar to this. And so here are the numbers for each of the alternatives, how it looks like in comparison to the others. And then what we did is a very interesting analysis of trying to forecast or estimate how this the cost for the different services for the baseline sample would look like up until 2050. And for this we attend had a consensus forecast based on 3 different measures, calculating for cost of inflation. And so because of this, we were able to calculate how it's going to look like in terms of dollars spent by based on the previous model up until 2050. So now this is the cost or the estimates for a sample. But then I mentioned that we used the synthetic population to try to come up with numbers by year. So what we did is we had the total population. We divided the length of their stay, and remember the length of time, the time frame that we used was 2 years and 2 months. And so we divided by it, and then we multiplied the number by 365 days. So we were able to calculate the cost per year, or how the cost per year would look like. So numbers are somewhat different, but the kind of the trends look similar. And so for this, we were able to actually calculate the cost increase up until 2050 based on this synthetic population. And we mentioned last meeting a little bit about the best practices. We just in general, the best practices portion, we organize it using the Intercept model. We focused on best practices and policies, but we looked at examples at the local, state, national, and international levels to have a much broader vision of this phenomena. And we were not grading any of the services. We just had to focus on those who had been proven and had promising programs with specific outcomes that we could look at. And so these some of these updates are going to be included in this report. I'm just gonna, I think we are pretty much done with this portion. I don't want to spend much more time, especially since you're going to have the report to look at. So I'm going to go ahead and check just for the timeline and upcoming tasks that we have for the project.
Octavio, before
Sure.
before you move on to
Sure,
that,
sure.
can you go back to the cost comparisons, couple of slides?
Do you want to see the chart, Bill, or?
No, one more back, that one.
Uh-huh.
So if I'm understanding correctly, sort of the construct for modeling cost comparisons that's
Mhm.
presented here, it takes what you call the synthetic population and sort of assumes a number of days in different kinds of alternatives, and then multiplies that out to different total costs if the entire population went through that alternative for the number of days that's
Yeah.
in the
So
column.
yes, Bill. So we had an estimate cost per day provided by different institutions.
So the
so-
challenge that I have with using that construct is that either we're saying that every member of that population would follow a identical path through, let's say, crisis stabilization and then sobering, or sobering then crisis stabilization, and then go to behavioral health counseling, and then also experience 51 days of residential treatment and 41.1 visits of whatever OP treatment is. And so
yeah, go ahead.
is that accurate? Like it kind of, or is it if all of the synthetic population did just sobering center for one day, or if all of the population did crisis stabilization for one day, or so is that so I can't envision a scenario where that results in anything that resembles reality.
Yes, so thank you for the question. And yeah, just clarify a little bit. So these numbers that we can see here are not for the synthetic population, but the overall sample that we measured, right? So we had the cost per day that was calculated, and then from the sample we calculated the average, the median, specifically for jail, the median days in jail that in the sample spent. And then we multiplied the cost per day times the days times the sample, and so we came up with this cost, with this number. However, it's true what you say. Each of these lines should be regarded as exactly like how would it look like if the entire sample would go exclusively to jail, or exclusively to sobering center, or exclusively to BHC. And that was kind of the only approach to calculate the costs per year for each of these services, based on some measure that can resemble reality, and in this case was a specific sample, a specific group of individuals who had this experience in with law enforcement.
Right, but the experience with law enforcement is in no way indicative of the criminogenic nor behavioral health needs of any population. So
certainly, yes.
So these numbers become almost misleading in that, you know, it just seems intuitively logical that a given population of people who have a need for behavioral health counseling would cost almost 100 times more than throwing them in jail. There's no way that it's just not possible. So
yeah, and you know, it is very important to there is still a lot to put in context in this analysis. These are just like initial results that we've discovered, but you're right, there is a lot of context behind that, and looking at the numbers, you can easily drop into conclusions, and you know, and you don't consider, for example, that the types of population that would go, for example, to behavioral court might not be the same population that goes into.
well, I think the critical flaw is the median number of days where it says jail 1 booking and jail +1 booking. The population we serve doesn't get booked and just spend 1 day. They don't get released. Maybe it's the specific offenses that you chose, but this doesn't pass the sniff test to me. And I think it's dramatically misleading.
Yeah, so that could be, of course, a result of the sample and the you know, the different criteria that was used to build the sample, and as yeah, the average or the mean for 13,000 individuals was one day. But then again, that of course could be due to the type of offenses that were included in their sample.
Well,
Bill?
and if people with needs that lead to behavioral health counseling are jailed and booked, based on the mere fact that they're likely to have law enforcement contact again and have a longer stay, the costs for the jail is just misleading because it says one day.
Right, and that's why it's important to put in context and look at the jail plus one cost, because that changes dramatically the cost per individual. And of course, and this is just looking at the sample of 19,000 individuals. But when you look at people who come to the justice system or have to contacts with law enforcement or are booked in this specific case more than once, the cost increases dramatically. So
I guess what's missing is the number out of that population that's convicted and sentenced and put in jail for months, years.
That unfortunately, that's not a segment of population that we can measure with the data that we have, unfortunately.
Okay, but then that makes this really misleading.
Can I just jump in really quickly? This is Sarah Quavigan from Sandag. We recognize that there are a lot of limitations with the data that we have, and not all of them have been presented here. They will be accounted for and contextualized in the report. So if anything here appears to be misleading, it will all be contextualized in the report. And we do recognize some of the limitations, which again are going to be accounted for more fully. But we definitely recognize these concerns.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, this was Sarah, and Sarah worked very closely with a research team that put together this calculations, and so thank you very much, Sarah, for giving us this context. Bill, I know that Darwin and Manuel have questions as well. Do you mind if we move into them?
No, go ahead. I just hope that this table doesn't end up in a report.
Yeah, thank you, Darwin.
Thank you. I flagged it too. It's funny. Thank you, Bill, because I just took a picture of it before you were making your comments. So actually, I would even go further than what Bill said. I think it's actually gets to the heart of our work for ATI. It's almost like if this is true, then we might as well just throw up our arms and give up. I mean, the whole thing of suggestion that alternatives to incarceration in jail is going to be more expensive is just ludicrous. And I think the other thing is, I don't know how you capture this, but because I realize there's not data for it, but my experience, and I've mentioned this before, and I'm worried because to me, there hasn't been enough discussion of this, which is the normal practice, what police officers are doing. If you go on ride-alongs, to me, what was the common practice is arresting folks for detaining folks for nuisance crimes, things like nuisance crimes, and you could tell it's most likely on house community, and then things like with mental health or drug addiction issues. And the police are very clear. I'll see you in a day or two. A lot of the folks, it's a regular occurrence, in and out, cycling out of the jail. This doesn't even capture that at all. And what it means, and this is, I wholeheartedly agree with what Bill's saying, is that the whole point, hopefully, of our work is to get out of this current status quo of having this population, for example, in terms of alternatives to incarceration, of having them cycling through in and out of jail, potentially hundreds, of times a year. And to me, that's got to be way more expensive than if you actually do things like particular types of services for the needs they have, and things like whether it's mental health, housing, or a combination. That in the long run is going to, of course, be much cheaper and much better way to operate and approach this population than our current model. And so I'm worried that this is not just misleading, but it goes at the heart of the work that we're trying to do here.
Yeah, and so thank you, Darwin. This is important to mention because these are just the initial numbers that we obtained, but still they need a lot of context, and we will try to make sure to include the context in the report. And this, the table is just not presented like this. And let me we've been having we were able to present these results to the working group, and there were of course a lot of a lot of concern as well with some of the numbers. So one of the things that we want to do moving forward is, now that we started to have these outcomes, start working together with both groups to actually be able to contextualize these numbers, so they're not presented just as is, because they as Bill mentioned, they might be misleading. Darwin, if you don't mind, I'm gonna let Manuel participate. Manuel.
Thank you very much. I completely agree. I would, with what Bill and Darwin have shared. I actually, since you kind of begin the presentation with the numbers, it's been really confusing and hard to understand. And it's definitely, when you showed the different graphs and even this chart, it just seems really inflated as far as like what the cost of rehabilitative services would be. And I guess I agree. I hope this doesn't make it on the report. And I think it's actually misleading. I agree that it's misleading. I would also ask, you said, this is the population, this is the data for the population we have, and we don't have the other data. Why was that other data not provided?
Manuel,
Who's
yeah, this
responsible
is
for providing that data?
yeah. So this is just because of the type of data. So so we can obtain from ARGIS and from the hub specific data from contacts with law enforcement and bookings, but there is no way to match or to see the development of each individual case. So it's not that the data was not provided, it's just not possible to obtain and match with this initial data we have.
And I would also add that I part of the thing that I see misleading here is when you have the long-term projection, the assumption that we'll continue to get as many cases as there are, so it drives up the cost, versus what research has shown, that when people are really given community-based services, they actually, that lowers the recidivism rate. And the problem is that what was mentioned, right? A lot of these services are services that are given to people within issue. Working with folks in the community, that's their experience. They keep in contact with law enforcement. So, we have the people, like our local people, who are being arrested on a daily basis because the cops already know them, and they'll go around and they'll charge them for minor things when they could be given other types of services instead of being arrested.
Yeah, and thank you, Manuel. That's very important to note. And yes, what you mentioned, that the estimates do calculate based on the sample, so the sample doesn't change. So the cost is calculated on there, like the sample of 19,000 individuals that we looked at, and so all the projections that we did were based on this initial sample. Manuel, if you don't mind, I'm gonna let Watana or
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead, Watana.
Okay, thanks. I hear you, Octavio, and I think Sarah, when you say it'll be contextualized, it'll be contextualized. I don't know how to contextualize this in a narrative that is particularly meaningful and understandable. If we don't understand it, some of us, and by understand, I mean, in terms of the work we do every day, these numbers don't look anything like we think they would look. sharing them with a group of 5 people who don't do this work every day, who have a lot of power to make policy change is a little scary to me. I also think that only including the county only cost is again, I'm not sure how you would contextualize that. 246 seems extremely low, but and everything else seems out of whack as well. I don't want this to be a slight on all the work that you all are doing. I don't want that to be the message that you're getting from the group. I think the questions that we're asking and the concerns that we're sharing are particularly meaningful because the audience that this is going to, again, has some significant ability to change policy. And again, I'm with Darwin. We might as well just throw up our hands and put everybody in jail if it's cheaper, and that's what we're looking at as a cost analysis. Well, there you go. But it's not getting at the heart of public safety, and that's the question. The question is what's the alternative to incarceration? Not is it cheaper to put somebody in jail as opposed to behavioral health counseling or a sobering center. I don't know. Again, I'm going back to those, I think it's 9 offenses that were agreed upon that we're looking at. Is that correct? The
Yeah.
booking offenses?
Mhm.
Okay. I mean, again, so then, in a contextualized narrative, you'd say, well, but maybe it has something to do with those 9 types of offenses. And then we go, well, what about the other ones then? Then why did we choose those? And we keep asking questions. I don't know. I'm not sure what else to say other than if anyone else has, I can't see if anybody else's hand is raised, so I'll just be quiet.
Yeah, no, thank you, Watana. And yeah, like the things you point out are very important. First of all, we have to remember that the numbers for jail were exclusively those for the sheriff, and so it is important to know that this might be like very very low levels of the estimate, because we were not able to get any data from others, from the involvement of other institutions. It was not possible to calculate the cost for, district attorneys or public defenders. So it is really, it's just telling one part of the story. And then the second is, yes, this is just something that, that we were able to calculate, but without the context, without story behind it, without putting together it, it's just not complete. And so one of the things that we hope is that now that we have this initial results, start looking for what are the potentials for that. Is it the sample? Is it the problem with the sample? What about the charges that were included in the analysis, and some other things are relevant to keep discussing based on this initial results that we had. Like, I don't see any other questions, so I'm just gonna jump ahead to just review some of the timeline and some of the pending items that we have, and then probably we can just leave a couple some minutes to keep discussing this in other parts of the presentation if you want. But just to remind you, we met with the advisory group, and we met with a working group, and we are drafting the December report. that will be presented this month. In January, we have another meeting with both groups, but we also have 2 community forums. And one of the things that we wanted to discuss with you is what suggestions do you have in terms of when to hold those community forums and how to be able to bring more people to participate in those. There are going to be virtual, but we want to know, like, if you have any thoughts or insights on what days would work best, what times will work best. We're as we did in the previous forum, community forums, we had some of them in the afternoon at this time of the day, and some of them in the morning. Maybe for the January forums, we have one in the afternoon and one in the morning, in different days to make it easier for people to attend. But maybe we can spend some time in the open debate portion of this meeting to discuss some ideas on how to bring more people to participate in this community forums. The other important thing that I wanted to mention is that we want to have a joint meeting again with the advisory group and the work group. The first meeting that we had was very, very productive, and there was a lot of positive feedback. So we want to have that opportunity today once more. And we were looking into having that meeting in person sometime in February between members of the advisory group and working groups. So these are also some ideas that we have, and what we wanted to know if you think that'll be feasible for you as members of the advisory group to come to downtown, in February. What times will work best? Would you think? And we will send a doodle poll to see what works best for everyone. And then finally, on March, we are presenting the comprehensive report to the county. So we still have 2 more months to work on this and to address any outstanding work on any of the goals and any changes and any adjustments to the outcomes that we find. So with that, this is all that I have presented for you. We have budgeted for 30 minutes for open discussion. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just ask you if you have any thoughts on anything that we presented today, anything else that we haven't discussed, and if you have any questions or ideas for the community forums and any preference for the joint February meeting. So I'm going to stop sharing right now. And please just raise your hand if you have any other questions, or it'd be really interesting to know if you have any ideas for, as I mentioned, for the community forums for February. Would it work better to have it in the afternoon, in the morning? What days and other? Charlene, please go ahead. Thank you very much for coming and participating.
Hi. So my question is, you're asking for what days or times or what would be better in getting more community involved. What were the numbers on the past meetings, and what seemed to be the higher number for those meetings? For the
I don't have that information on the top of my head, but we do have those numbers. And we can look at those certainly and try to come up. And that's a great suggestion. Just see what worked best, like what time when we had more participation, maybe just go from there.
That would be mine.
Yeah. Thank you, Charlene. That's a great suggestion. Darwin.
I was going to come at this in a different way. For me, at least the community members I'm working with, they're still not convinced that this is going to make a difference, that we're going to have, or what the policy recommendations we're going to have, and if it's going to be any different than the status quo we have. one of the things I thought would be helpful, and I was waiting for him to report tonight, your presentation, which is best practices in other cities. Because it's clear that in terms of alternatives to incarceration, a lot of cities are way ahead of us, have really great practices, and then connecting back to what Bill started us with, can also show they're more cost effective. A lot of cities can show that, especially in terms of dealing with mental health crisis. Jail law enforcement is the most expensive option. So I'm curious, because that was supposed to be, I thought, part of what Sandag was going to present on other cities' best practices of what they're doing. And certainly if that's part of what our work and what we're going to be presenting, I know a lot of community members that would be interested and highly motivated to come.
Yeah, thank you very much, Darwin. Yeah, we are approaching to have finalized the best practices portion. It's included in this month's report, so you'll have some updates on the best practices. We unfortunately were not able to just include all of the things that we found because it was because of time constraints, but certainly we can include it in the next meeting. But also we're going to share with you the report so you can take a look and just have any observations.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Darwin. One other Watana, please.
Yeah, so I too, I think the groups that I'm working with are very interested in knowing what's working in other jurisdictions. Much like Darwin mentioned, I'm trying to find a good pitch to help people get more involved in in the public meetings, and not really able to put together anything super compelling for them. So if there's something, again, if we can kind of define better what we're looking for from the public at these meetings, regardless of what time we have them or what day we have them, I think that we could increase participation.
Thank you, Watana. One thing we're going to do, of course, is once we come up with a date, come up with the messaging, and share with you and ask your help in spreading the voice and of course asking for any feedback on the messaging and on the content and the things we're asking the community to participate on. So we will probably. We'll have to move fast because it's January, and the next couple of weeks probably nobody's going to be thinking about what are the meetings they're going to attend in January. So we'll try to make sure that we come up with some dates and with some messaging sooner rather than later. One other thing that we included in the agenda, just to see if there are any updates on the addendum that some members of the advisory group were working on, and if you're ready to share with us, where does that process stand at? Bill?
So there is a secret conspiracy going on between Watana and Andrea and I to sort of kickstart off the addendum process by using the outline of the discussions that we had in our subgroup, and putting it out to the rest of the group for input and edits. We're shooting for trying to get this done in December, realizing that we're behind, and that the last week of December isn't really a work week. Mm-hmm. Except for nerds like me who like to play with technology. So I think that based on the timeline slide that you just showed, where the first draft of the final report is intended to be delivered in January, and since this is an addendum that doesn't really affect the structure and content of the report itself, but it's add on to the report. I'd like to ask for a grace period of a couple of weeks past the end of the year, just to get further input on what we create and seek editing for.
Okay, yeah, so yeah, maybe what we can do is just think that the addendum is not going to be included in the draft. And so that will allow for the advisory group to have more time to finalize the product and then include it in the final report.
Yeah, it'll probably improve the quality of the addendum if we see the draft final report as well.
Yeah, and Andrea's asking if this is for the final report or for the return in May. So what we're looking is for this to be part of the final report that we present on March. So yeah, thank you very much, Bill. And yeah, we can talk offline about it, but yeah, if I think we can just think that we're not going to include it in the draft and look for it to be part of the final instead. Also, I mean, we might want to let some people of the audience to ask questions, but before we do that, do you have any preference on the joint meeting with the working group for February? As we mentioned, we are planning to do it in person. So just in general, like what afternoons work best or mornings, assuming that it's going to be somewhere in downtown, what does work best for, at least for those of you who are here. We're going to send, of course, a doodle poll for the rest. But we need to have some ideas to propose and to send the doodle poll in the coming days. What's Anna?
Now that I have my camera on,
Yeah.
I'm low tech now. Mornings would be better since you're asking the people that are in the meeting. Mornings would be better for me, just because it's we'll start the day. And definitely not a midday. So either book in the day would be, I'll go book in the day, but mornings for sure would work best. I'm not located downtown, so I would have to go there.
Yeah,
which would be great. I appreciate the opportunity also to engage the work group in person.
Yeah, thank you.
And to meet my fellow advisory board members.
Yes, to be able to meet for the first time in person.
Yeah.
Of course. Charlene.
Bill, was your hand up before me, or is that from?
Oh no, Charlene, ladies first, please.
Okay. My concern is downtown parking is terrible. And the mornings are terrible downtown too. So unless you're already there, but I'm not a fan of downtown. So are we going to have a hybrid option in the event that this is in the morning, or no?
Yeah, we can look at that. We can look at different options. For now we're just exploring what would work best for you. For some of you, and maybe just to come up with some ideas to propose in the doodle poll before we send it.
I think that you may want to consider including in the doodle poll a regional preference for the in-person meeting. What comes to mind is the Community Corrections Partnership Plan group had a meeting up at the probation training facility. That's more, it's not downtown, it's off the 15 somewhere. But that's a great location, one, because it has a huge parking lot and it avoids some of the concerns, except for those coming from South Bay and Chula Vista would have a longer travel time. So you might want to consider including potential location preferences in the doodle poll as well. I also think the County Operations Center is a good target location, again, because it's got a parking garage that's free. And there's obviously, meeting space there in that entire complex. And then lastly, a request for me to avoid the court days that we have for collaborative court, because that's just tough for me to not be here at work, which are Monday and Fridays. So anytime, anything that's not a Monday and not a Friday.
Okay, good. Yeah, we usually shoot for Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. So maybe like be one of those two. Well, those three, I'm sorry. And yeah, we'll be looking into other options for depending on how many people we have, and yeah, we'll just gathering some ideas, but we hope that we can come up with something that's easier for everyone. We really want to have the opportunity to have you all in person, so we're going to do our best to make it happen.
I have to concur with Bill because I think that's awesome. We have to really take in consideration to folks that are up in North County, East County, and where's more the central location. And if you guys could do that with the county's operations location over there, in Kearney Mesa, that's a pretty good kind of middle ground for everyone, really. And the parking is multiple lots there, and the structure. So I have to agree that would be a really good location as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we'll look into that as well. So if you don't have any other questions, and maybe we can ask if there are any questions from the audience, if they have any questions or want to participate there. Just a few people there, but if not, I think we can close this meeting today. It was a lot of information, and I apologize because the data is very dense, and we wanted to be able to present it this month, and it still needs a lot of work, and it needs a lot of context, and so apologize if it just came as just dry numbers, but it was very important for us to share with you this information as soon as possible, so we have enough time to work on it as we move forward. So I'll just ask if there are any last questions or comments from the members of the advisory group or from the members of the audience. And if not, I'm going to say thank you very much for coming today. Again, we really appreciate your help. We really appreciate the work that you do for this. Your comments are very important for what we do. I know, Watana, you said that this is not a reflection of our work, and we really appreciate that because you make our work actually have the context that it needs, and of course to recognize that you're here doing this voluntary work, that it's been very very interesting, has helped a lot our research process, so we really thank you for that. And thank you for being here today, and just have a good time with your families. Happy holidays. Enjoy the break if you have the break. Some of you might not have a break, or even if you do, you're going to still be working. And I'm not looking at you, Bill, but or any of you for that matter. So I really appreciate it. Thank you for coming today, for your comments, and we want more of your input if you think of once we share the report with you guys, we would appreciate your comments and feedback. Okay, well, thank you very much. Happy holidays to everyone. Thank you for those of you who came, members of the audience who came today, and for all of you who are here today. Thank you very much. And for Sandak, my staff, thank you very much for your help.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care.